Captain Han stood on the observation deck of the Maury flagship, eyes fixed on the blue planet below. Earth looked peaceful from orbit, oceans and landmasses swirling with white clouds. The year was 2137, and the Maury Collective had just made their most significant discovery in decades. "Preliminary scans complete, Captain," said Lieutenant Ba, approaching with a data tablet. "The species calls themselves humans. They've achieved basic spaceflight, but haven't expanded beyond their lunar colony." Han took the tablet, scrolling through images of human cities, vehicles, and weapons. "Primitive," he muttered, "but there's something unusual about their development pattern." "Sir, look at their technological timeline. They advanced from basic combustion engines to nuclear power in less than 2 centuries. That's remarkably fast." Bai nodded. The science division noted that as well. They seem particularly adaptable. "Adaptable but disorganized," Han said, zooming in on images of national borders. Over 100 separate governing bodies. They waste resources competing with each other. "The collective will easily establish dominance." Han continued monitoring Earth for 3 weeks, observing human behavior, communication patterns, and military capabilities. He watched their entertainment broadcasts, studied their conflicts, and analyzed their resource consumption. Something about them made him uneasy, though he couldn't identify what. In his private quarters that night, Han recorded his final assessment. Humans appear technologically inferior but show concerning traits. They adapt quickly to new challenges. They innovate when faced with limitations. Most troubling, they occasionally demonstrate unusual cooperation across their divided territories when threatened. "I recommend caution in our approach." The Maury High Command dismissed Han's concerns. Humans were just another species to add to their collection of protectorates, willing or unwilling. 1 month later, Diplomat Kang arrived in Earth orbit with a fleet of 20 ships. His mission was simple: present humans with the standard terms of surrender, while making it sound like an alliance. The Maury had perfected this approach with 17 other species. "Remember," Kang instructed his staff, "we are offering them protection and guidance. Do not mention resource extraction or population control until after the agreement is signed." The Maury sent their first transmission to all major Earth governments simultaneously. "Greetings from the Maury Collective. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations. We propose a meeting with your world leaders in 7 days." The response was faster than expected. Humans agreed to a meeting in a city called Geneva. They seemed eager, even excited about first contact. Kang smiled at their naivety. Dr. Park was not excited. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had been called to join the diplomatic team, but something felt wrong about the aliens' approach. They arrived with 20 warships, she told General Lee during the pre-meeting briefing. "That's not how you start a friendly conversation." "What do you suggest?" asked the general. "We can't exactly turn them away. Their technology is centuries beyond ours." Park studied the limited data they had on the Maury ships. "I'm not saying we should fight. I'm saying we should be careful what we agree to." Their message was perfectly crafted to appeal to human psychology. Too perfect. They've done this before. The world leaders gathered in Geneva's International Conference Center, an ancient building now hastily modified to accommodate visitors from another world. Security was tight, but ultimately symbolic. If the Maury wanted conflict, Earth had little chance of resistance. Diplomat Kang arrived with 6 other Maury officials. They were tall, thin beings with gray-blue skin and 4-fingered hands. Their eyes, 3 per individual, blinked vertically rather than horizontally. They wore what appeared to be ceremonial robes in deep purple with silver patterns that seemed to move when viewed from different angles. "We are honored to meet the representatives of Earth," Kang said through a translation device. His voice sounded almost melodic. The Maury Collective spans 17 star systems and includes 23 species living in harmony. "We wish to welcome humanity into our peaceful community." The human delegates applauded politely. though Dr. Park noticed how Kang's third eye constantly scanned the room, assessing and calculating. This wasn't a diplomatic meeting. It was a military assessment. Over the next 3 days, Kang presented the Mori proposal. Earth would join the collective as a developing partner. The Mori would provide advanced technology, medical knowledge, and protection from hostile elements in the galaxy. In exchange, Earth would allow Mori representatives to establish guidance centers around the planet and permit resource surveys of the solar system. Most world leaders were impressed. The promise of advanced technology and interstellar protection seemed generous. Only a few, including Dr. Park, recognized the carefully hidden implications in the agreement's details. During a private break, Park approached the Chinese president. "The technology transfer section is one way," she whispered. "We get specific technologies they choose, but we must share all of our developments. The guidance centers have immunity from local laws and can be any size they determine. And the resource survey grants them immediate mining rights." "I see that," he replied quietly. "But what choice do we have? Their ships could destroy our major cities in minutes." "We have to buy time," Park insisted. "Sign something that looks like acceptance but gives us room to prepare." That evening, while the human delegates debated among themselves, Captain Han met with Kang aboard the flagship. "The humans will accept our terms," Kang reported confidently. "Most of them are eager for our technology. A few seem suspicious, but they're being overruled." Han wasn't convinced. "I've been watching them for weeks now. Don't underestimate them. There's something about how quickly they solve problems that concerns me." "Every species resists at first," Kang dismissed. "But once we establish our guidance centers and position our defense platforms, resistance becomes impossible. The pattern has worked 17 times before." "The others weren't humans," Han said quietly. On the final day of negotiations, Earth's representatives presented their response. They would accept the Mori partnership with minor modifications to the agreement. The changes seemed inconsequential: specific locations for the guidance centers, scheduled times for resource surveys, and a phased implementation of Mori oversight. Kang reviewed the changes and smiled. The humans thought they were being clever, but the modified agreement still gave the Mori everything they needed to begin the subjugation process. He signed immediately. "A historic day for both our peoples," he announced. "The first Mori guidance teams will arrive within 1 month. We look forward to a long and productive partnership." As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Park watched the Mori delegates with a tight expression. She approached General Lee afterward. "They accepted our changes too easily," she said. "Of course they did," Lee replied. "The changes don't matter to them. What matters is what we do next." Park nodded. "How soon can we begin implementing Protocol Omega?" "It's already started. While everyone was focused on the Geneva talks, we've been moving key personnel and resources underground. Research teams are ready to study whatever technology they provide us. Manufacturing has shifted to hardened facilities." "They'll discover eventually," Park warned. "By then, we need to understand their technology well enough to have a fighting chance." Lee looked up at the sky, where Mori ships hovered invisible to the naked eye. "We appear to submit while preparing to resist. It's the oldest strategy in human history." 1 week later, Captain Han reviewed the initial settlement reports. Mori guidance centers were being established in key locations around Earth. Humans seemed compliant, even helpful. Everything was proceeding according to standard protocol. Yet Han couldn't shake his uneasiness. During a routine scan of human communications, his analysts had detected unusual patterns of data transfers between research facilities. When questioned, human officials claimed it was related to normal scientific collaboration. Han didn't believe them. He requested additional surveillance drones be deployed around major human population centers. "You're being paranoid," Diplomat Kang told him when he shared his concerns. "The humans have accepted their role. They're grateful for our superior guidance." Han looked out at Earth again, the blue planet now dotted with the first Mori installations. "Perhaps you're right," he said, "but I've learned that appearances can be deceiving. These humans, They smile too much for a species that's just surrendered their independence. In her underground laboratory, Dr. Park carefully disassembled a Mori communication device, scanning each component before her team cataloged it. Similar work was happening in hidden facilities around the world. "They think we're beaten," she whispered to herself. "They have no idea what humans do when backed into a corner." Above her, the Mori continued their methodical occupation, unaware that their newest conquest was already planning their downfall. Researcher Jin moved carefully through the virtual display, swiping historical events into chronological order. The data room aboard the Mori research vessel glowed with the timeline of human history, each major technological advancement marked in pulsing red. "This can't be correct," Jin muttered, checking the verification algorithms again. "No species advances this rapidly." The timeline showed humans using simple steam engines in the early 1800s. Less than 200 years later, they had crewed spacecraft. Most species the Mori had encountered took at least 5 centuries to make similar progress. Jin's assistant, researcher Min, looked up from her own display. "The data has been verified 3 times. Their rate of technological development accelerated dramatically during their global conflicts." "That's what troubles me," Jin said, highlighting the periods humans called World War I and World War IA. "Most species self-destruct during such intensive conflicts. Humans seem to thrive on them." Jin had been assigned to the historical assessment team 3 weeks after the initial occupation began. While Mori guidance centers were being established across Earth, research teams analyzed every aspect of human development, searching for weaknesses to exploit and strengths to neutralize. "Look at this pattern," Jin said, bringing up a new display showing weapon development. From gunpowder weapons to nuclear bombs in less than 4 centuries. The Valkyrie took nearly 1,000 years to make similar advancements. Min nodded, and their information technology growth is even more concerning. From basic computing to global neural networks in less than a century. Jin drafted his 3rd report to Mori High Command, emphasizing the unusual adaptability of humans. "This species demonstrates exceptional problem-solving capabilities, particularly under duress. Standard containment protocols may be insufficient." He sent the report, knowing it would likely be ignored like his previous warnings. In the command center of the orbital flagship, General Du reviewed the daily security reports with growing satisfaction. The occupation was proceeding smoothly. Guidance centers now operated in 57 key locations around the planet, and resource extraction had begun in the asteroid belt. "Another report from the research division," his aide said, handing him a data tablet. Researcher Jin continues to express concerns about human adaptability. Du scoffed. "Jin sees threats everywhere. Did he include any actual evidence of resistance?" "No, sir. Only historical analysis suggesting humans might be more dangerous than they appear." "History doesn't concern me," Du said, dismissing the report with a flick of his finger. "Current reality does. Are humans resisting?" "No, sir. They appear compliant in all monitored regions." "Exactly as expected," Du said, turning to the holographic display of Earth. Small green dots indicated Mori facilities, spreading across the continents like a growing infection. "Every species resists in their hearts, but few have the capability to challenge us. Humans are no different." Du had overseen 3 previous planetary incorporations into the Mori collective. The pattern was always the same: initial diplomatic contact, swift occupation disguised as partnership, followed by complete resource extraction and eventual population management. Humans would follow this pattern like all the others. "Arrange an inspection tour of the North American guidance centers," Du told his aide. "I want to see these humans myself. Perhaps then Jin will stop pestering me with his paranoid reports." 2 days later, General Du's shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, landing at the Chicago Guidance Center. The massive facility had been constructed in what was once a public park, its gleaming metal towers standing in stark contrast to the human architecture surrounding it. Center Director Yun greeted the general at the landing pad. "Welcome to Earth, General. We're honored by your presence." How are the humans responding to guidance? Du asked as they walked through the facility. Generally well, Yun replied. They're fascinated by our technology and eager to learn. Perhaps too eager. Explain. They ask many questions, especially about our propulsion systems and energy generation. We provide the approved information, of course, but their inquiries are persistent. Du nodded. Natural curiosity. All primitive species are awed by advanced technology. They entered the main control room, where both Mori personnel and human assistants monitored the city. Humans moved efficiently between workstations, seemingly comfortable with their Mori supervisors. You see, Du gestured to the working humans. They accept their place. Jin's concerns are unfounded. Perhaps, Yun conceded. Though we've detected unusual power consumption patterns in several research facilities outside our direct observation. What do the humans say about this? They claim it's related to adapting their infrastructure to our technology. Their explanation seems reasonable, but something doesn't feel right. They comply too easily on major issues, while persistently challenging us on minor details. It's as if they're deliberately drawing our attention to trivial matters. Du frowned. Have security conduct surprise inspections of these research facilities. If they're hiding something, we'll find it. In a reinforced underground laboratory beneath Chicago's old university campus, Engineer Lee carefully examined the metal sample under an electron microscope. The piece had been taken from a damaged panel on a Mori shuttle, accidentally dented during maintenance. Incredible, Lee whispered, recording her observations. The molecular structure reconfigures under different energy states. That's how their hulls withstand both atmospheric entry and space conditions. Around her, 20 other scientists worked on different components of Mori technology. Some analyzed power systems, others communication devices. All worked in near silence, aware of the importance of secrecy. Dr. Kim, the laboratory director, approached Lee's workstation. Any progress? Lee nodded, keeping her voice low despite the sophisticated jamming devices that masked their conversations from Mori surveillance. I believe I can replicate the basic structure with modified carbon titanium composites. Not as effective as their original material, but perhaps 70% as strong. Good enough to begin prototype defense systems. Possibly. Combined with Professor Ju's energy diffusion concept, we might be able to develop shields against their lower power weapons. Kim checked her watch. The inspection team will tour the public laboratory upstairs in 20 minutes. Everyone needs to be at their assigned stations before then. The underground facility was one of 30 similar installations around the world, all carefully hidden from Mori detection. While appearing to collaborate with their new partners, humans were systematically studying and reverse engineering alien technology. Has the data been transmitted to the other facilities? Lee asked. Yes, the buried fiber network is working perfectly. The Mori still don't understand that we never fully transitioned to wireless communication for our most sensitive information. Lee gathered her notes. I'll have preliminary fabrication specs ready by tomorrow. If we can produce enough material. One step at a time, Kim cautioned. Right now, our priority is understanding. Production comes later. General Du's inspection tour continued to Beijing, Moscow, and London. At each guidance center, he saw the same pattern. Compliant humans, efficient operations, and no signs of resistance. His confidence grew with each visit. During his final stop in London, Du met with diplomat Kang, who had overseen the initial contact with humans. The incorporation proceeds exactly as planned, Du told Kang as they watched humans work below them. Jin's concerns about their adaptability are theoretical at best. In practice, they behave like all other species we've encountered. Kang nodded slowly. Perhaps, though I find it strange that a species with such a violent history would surrender so completely. They recognize superior power, Du said confidently. Their primitive weapons are toys compared to ours. What choice do they have but to submit? Yet their history shows they rarely submit, even against overwhelming odds. Du laughed. History is just stories. Reality is what we see before us. Look at them, working diligently under our guidance, grateful for the scraps of technology we provide. I hope you're right, Kang said. For all our sakes. That evening, a Mori security team conducted a surprise inspection of the Chicago University Research Complex. They found exactly what they expected: humans working on approved technology integration projects, carefully documented and completely transparent. All activities within authorized parameters. The security leader reported to Director Yun. No evidence of restricted research. 200 feet below them, Lee and her team continued their work, alerted to the inspection by sensors monitoring the upper levels. The real laboratory, with its forbidden research, remained undiscovered. Similar scenes played out across the planet. Mori inspectors found exactly what humans wanted them to find, while the true work happened elsewhere. Back aboard the flagship, General Du filed his final assessment report. Human incorporation proceeds according to standard protocols. Their technology is primitive, their resistance non-existent. Resource extraction can be accelerated, and population management may begin ahead of schedule. Researcher Jin read the report with growing alarm. The general had seen what he expected to see, not what was actually happening. Jin had studied enough human history to recognize the pattern. They appeared to submit while secretly preparing to resist. Jin drafted one final warning, knowing it would likely be his last if he couldn't provide concrete evidence. Human historical patterns suggest they are most dangerous when apparently defeated. Request additional surveillance and security measures before proceeding to advanced extraction phase. Du dismissed the warning without reading beyond the first paragraph. Remove Jin from the research division, he told his aide. Assign him to asteroid mining oversight, where his paranoia won't waste our time. 6 months into the occupation, the Mori Collective had established complete dominance over Earth, or so they believed. Their guidance centers controlled major population areas, their ships monitored global communications, and their technology extraction proceeded on schedule. In her underground laboratory, Lee had just achieved a significant breakthrough. The alien metal they had been studying could now be replicated using Earth materials. It wasn't as strong as the original, but it was strong enough. Begin production immediately, Dr. Kim ordered after reviewing the test results. Coordinate with the other facilities. Priority goes to shield components and hull plating. How soon until we're ready? Lee asked. Kim's expression was grim but determined. Another month, perhaps 2. The Mori are already beginning the resource stripping of our outer solar system. We need to be ready before they start on Earth itself. Lee nodded, sending the production specifications through the secure network to facilities around the world. Beneath the apparent calm of occupation, humanity was preparing for war. On the Mori flagship, General Du reviewed the latest resource reports with satisfaction, completely unaware that the compliant, primitive humans were about to show their true capabilities. Their weapons are toys, he had said repeatedly. He would soon discover how wrong he was. Professor Kim hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned as she stared at the holographic display, tracing energy pathways through the partially disassembled Mori power core. 6 months of occupation had changed her. Once a theoretical physicist with a comfortable academic position, she now led a resistance cell working from an abandoned mine complex outside Seoul. The answer has to be here, she muttered, adjusting the scanner. The stolen power core hummed softly on the workbench, its inner components exposed. 3 previous attempts to understand its function had ended in failure, and 2 dead researchers. Kim's assistant, Dr. Jun, entered the lab with fresh coffee. You should rest, he said, placing the cup near her workstation. Exhaustion leads to mistakes. We don't have time for rest, Kim replied without looking up. The Mori began strip mining operations on Mars last week. Earth is next. Jun nodded grimly. The Mori occupation had revealed its true nature after the first 3 months. The partnership was a sham. Earth was simply another resource to be harvested. Mori ships now filled orbital positions around the planet, their mining vessels systematically stripping the moon of valuable minerals. "I think I found something," Kim said suddenly, zooming in on a strange crystalline structure at the core's center. "This isn't just a power source, it's a transmitter. The entire system is connected to the Mori network. That's why our replicas haven't worked," Jun realized. "We've been treating it as an isolated power system, but it's actually part of a larger grid." Kim adjusted her scanners, focusing on the crystal. "If we can decode the transmission protocols, we might be able to access their entire command network." For the next 12 hours, Kim and Jun worked feverishly, mapping the energy pulses that flowed through the crystal. Slowly, a pattern emerged, a complex language of energy transfers that connected all Mori technology. "It's beautiful," Kim whispered as understanding dawned. "They don't use separate systems for power, communications, and control. It's all one integrated network, like a technological nervous system." "Can we access it?" Jun asked. Kim's tired face broke into a smile. "Better. We can speak its language." 3 days later, Kim's discovery was transmitted through the underground human network, a global web of resistance cells connected by old-fashioned fiber optic lines buried too deep for Mori scanners to detect. Research teams in hidden facilities across the planet immediately began implementing her findings. In a concealed bunker beneath the ruins of Chicago University, Engineer Lee received Kim's data package with trembling hands. This changes in the main resistance hub beneath Seoul. Leaders from global cells gathered for final coordination. Professor Kim presented the latest intelligence. "The Mori network relies on continuous connection," she explained. "Their systems aren't designed to function independently for long periods. If we can isolate enough facilities simultaneously, their command structure will be vulnerable." Teams across the globe began downloading Mori databases from compromised facilities, extracting valuable intelligence about their military capabilities, command structures, and future plans. What they discovered confirmed their worst fears. The Mori hadn't come to partner with humanity. They intended to strip Earth of all valuable resources, including biological specimens. Humans were to be harvested along with minerals and water. By mid-afternoon, the Mori had begun to recover. Emergency systems restored partial communications to some facilities, allowing for coordinated response. Commander Yoon supervised the security sweep of the Seoul Guidance Center, his face grim as teams discovered the interface devices attached to their systems. "The humans have been studying us," he told General Du via emergency channel. "These devices mimic our communication protocols perfectly. They've been in our network for weeks, possibly months. Find the source," Du ordered. "Find the humans responsible and make examples of them." Yoon deployed security teams to known research facilities, but found nothing suspicious. The humans working there appeared genuinely surprised by the disruptions. What Yoon didn't know was that the real resistance operated from abandoned locations, old mines, decommissioned military bunkers, forgotten subway tunnels. By the time Mori forces began searching these areas, the resistance had already evacuated, taking their discoveries with them. Engineer Lee arrived at the emergency meeting point, an old lighthouse on Lake Michigan, carrying data drives filled with Mori technical specifications. "Did everyone make it out?" she asked the coordinator. "Most teams reported successful extraction," he replied. "We lost contact with Bangkok and Oslo. Presumed captured." Lee closed her eyes briefly, honoring their sacrifice. "And the data?" "Assembled and transmitted to all cells. We now have complete schematics for their weapons, ships, and defense systems." Lee nodded, allowing herself a moment of pride. 6 months of patient work had culminated in this breakthrough. Humanity now possessed the knowledge to fight back. As night fell, the Mori had restored communications to most facilities. General Du convened an emergency council aboard the flagship. "This attack was coordinated and sophisticated," he told his commanders. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond our assessment. We should increase security at all facilities," suggested Commander Yoon. "Double the guards, Implement continuous scans for unauthorized devices. That's not enough, Du replied, his voice cold with anger. We need to remind these humans of their place. Select 10 major population centers. I want orbital strikes on each. Nothing devastating, just enough to demonstrate our power. Diplomat Kang stepped forward. General, I advise caution. If the humans are capable of this level of technological adaptation, escalation might. I did not ask for your advice, Diplomat. Du snapped. The humans have challenged us. They must learn the consequences. Orders were transmitted to the orbital platforms. Targeting systems came online, selecting government buildings in major cities. But when the weapons fired, nothing happened. The platforms reported successful strikes, but ground observers confirmed no impacts. What's happening? Du demanded. His weapons officer checked the systems repeatedly. The platforms show all functions normal, sir, but it appears the targeting data was redirected. The weapons fired into empty ocean. Du stared in disbelief. The humans hadn't just disrupted communications, they had taken control of Mori weapon systems. In the Seoul Resistance Hub, Professor Kim watched the Moris' failed attack with grim satisfaction. The redirects worked. Their targeting systems are still compromised. How long will our control last? Colonel Jun asked. Not long. They'll purge their systems completely once they realize what's happened. Maybe a few hours at most. Jun nodded, turning to the assembled resistance leaders. Then we have a brief window of opportunity. For the first time since they arrived, the Mori are vulnerable. I suggest we use this advantage to strike directly at their command structure. Kim looked at the determined faces around her. 6 months of occupation, of pretending to submit while secretly preparing, had led to this moment. Agreed, she said. Transmit the attack coordinates to all cells. It's time to show the Mori that Earth is not theirs to take. His officers looked at him in surprise. The Mori hadn't attempted direct communication with human forces since the early days of the occupation. Sir, the communications officer asked, open a channel to their lid vessel. I want to speak with whoever commands this fleet. After a moment, the main screen shifted to show a human female in what appeared to be a modified Mori control center. Professor Kim sat calmly in the command chair, her expression neutral but confident. This is High Commander Nam of the Mori Collective. Identify yourself. Kim inclined her head slightly. Professor Kim, Earth Defense Command. I've been expecting your call, High Commander. Nam studied the human carefully. You've been studying us for decades. Yes, since 2089, when our SETI program detected unusual patterns in what we thought was background radiation. It took 10 years to recognize it as communication, and another 20 to begin deciphering your technology. Yet you appeared primitive when we arrived. Kim smiled slightly. A deliberate deception. We knew we couldn't match your military power directly, so we presented an easier target than we actually were. We needed time to adapt your technology to our purposes. Nam felt a chill. The implications were staggering. The Horizon Protocol. What is it? A comprehensive defense system based on Mori technology, but guided by human intuition. The ships you see are just the beginning. As if on cue, the tactical display flashed with new alerts. Across Earth's surface, previously undetected installations were powering up. Massive energy signatures appearing where there should have been nothing but ruins. We've been building while you've been destroying empty cities, Kim explained. You thought you were fighting desperate resistance forces. In reality, you were being studied, your tactics recorded, your technology analyzed and improved. Nam turned to his tactical officer. Analysis of those installations. They appear to be planetary defense systems, sir, using Mori technology, but with energy signatures 40% more powerful than our equivalent systems. Nam returned his attention to the human. Why reveal this now? Because the time for deception has passed. We want you to understand your situation clearly. Kim's expression hardened. Your invasion force is surrounded by weapons more powerful than your own, controlled by beings your tactical systems cannot predict. The collective faces two choices: peaceful withdrawal or complete destruction. Before Nam could respond, General Du stepped forward. These are empty threats. No primitives could possibly. Target the smallest installation. Kim interrupted calmly. Use your strongest weapons. See what happens. Nam hesitated, then nodded to his tactical officer. Single strike on the smallest detected installation. Full power. The Mori flagship's main weapon charged and fired, sending a devastating energy beam toward a facility in what humans called the Sahara Desert. According to all Mori calculations, the strike should have vaporized the target instantly. Instead, the beam seemed to distort as it approached the facility, then dissipated completely before reaching its target. Impossible, whispered the tactical officer. Adaptive energy diffusion, Kim explained, based on your own shield technology, but significantly improved. We call it the Aegis system. Nam stared at the undamaged installation, understanding dawning. You've surpassed our technology. In some ways, yes. Your technology is more refined, more elegant. Ours is more adaptive, more resilient. The combination has proven formidable. General Du had heard enough. This is a deception, some trick of sensor manipulation. He turned to the weapons officer. Full barrage on all detected installations. Now, belay that order, Nam commanded sharply. To Kim, he said, I request time to consult with the collective leadership. Kim nodded. You have 12 hours, High Commander. We will maintain our current positions until then. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. You can't seriously be considering negotiation, Du protested. These are primitives bluffing with stolen technology. Nam turned to him coldly. They detected our signals 50 years ago. They prepared for our arrival. They allowed us to believe we were conquering them while they studied us. Does that sound like the behavior of primitives, General? Before Du could respond, an urgent communication arrived from the Mori homeworld. The Supreme Director of the Collective demanded an immediate report on the deteriorating situation on Earth. As Nam prepared his report, resistance forces around the globe activated the final phase of the Horizon Protocol. Hidden installations, some buried deep underground, others disguised as ruined buildings, powered up, revealing a planetary defense network that had been built during the months of apparent Mori dominance. In the command center of Earth's unified defense, Professor Kim met with the Global Leadership Council. The revelation strategy worked, she reported. High Commander Nam is clearly shaken. More importantly, there's division among the Mori command structure. Colonel Bake studied the tactical display showing Mori fleet positions. General Du remains dangerous. He's positioning forces for a potential mass strike. He'll be overruled, Dr. Choi predicted. The Mori operate by consensus. Nam has already requested consultation with their home government. How certain are we that they'll withdraw? Asked one of the council members. Kim considered this carefully. The Mori expand by calculating risk and reward. They believed Earth would be an easy conquest with valuable resources. We've now demonstrated that the cost of continuing this conflict far outweighs any potential gain. And if they decide to fight anyway, then we reveal our final advantage. On the Mori flagship, Nam received the response from the Supreme Director. It was brief and clear. Verify the human capabilities, and if confirmed, negotiate withdrawal. Nam summoned his senior staff, excluding General Du, whose aggressive stance had become a liability. We must confirm whether the human capabilities are real or an elaborate deception, Nam told them. I want detailed scans of their vessels and installations. The results came in quickly and left no room for doubt. The human fleet contained genuine Mori technology, enhanced in ways their own engineers considered theoretically possible but had never implemented. The planetary defense network was equally authentic, with energy signatures that matched or exceeded Mori equivalents. How is this possible? Nam asked Jin. Even with decades of studying our communications, They shouldn't have been able to advance so quickly. Jin had been pondering this question since they intercepted the transmission. I believe it's their cognitive diversity, sir. The Mori achieved technological supremacy through methodical linear advancement, each innovation building carefully on established principles. And humans, they think differently. They make intuitive leaps. They try improbable solutions. They combine technologies in ways that often violate optimization principles. 90% of their attempts likely fail, but the 10% that succeed can produce remarkable innovations. Nam considered this. You're saying their strength is disorder. Not disorder, diversity. Their scientists don't all think the same way. When faced with our technology, they didn't try to reproduce it exactly. They adapted it, improved it, combined it with their own ideas. As Nam prepared to open negotiations with Earth's leadership, news arrived that threatened to shatter the Mori collective itself. Their colony on Mars, established early in the occupation, had gone silent. Preliminary scans showed human-modified ships in Martian orbit. Worse, communications from the home system reported that several outer colonies were questioning the collective's expansion policy. The costly failure on Earth was sparking dissent throughout Mori society. The collective is beginning to fracture, Nam realized. For a species that valued unity and consensus above all else, this was a crisis beyond imagination. In her command center, Professor Kim received a surprising transmission, a private channel request from Science Officer Jin. "I'm speaking without authorization," Jin said when the connection was established. "High Commander Nam is preparing to negotiate withdrawal, but General Du is planning a final strike against your forces. He believes your capabilities are a bluff." Kim studied the Mori scientists carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've studied your species extensively. I warned my government about underestimating humans, but they wouldn't listen. Now I fear Du's actions will lead to unnecessary destruction on both sides." "What do you suggest?" Jin hesitated. "There's something you should know. The Mori have an ancient text, what you might call a prophecy, about meeting a species that would end our expansion. It describes beings who turn order to chaos and strength to weakness. Many believed it was superstition, but now, you think we're these beings. I think it no longer matters whether the prophecy is true. What matters is that many Mori are beginning to believe it is. Our society values consensus. If enough believe that fighting humans violates cosmic order, the collective will withdraw regardless of military considerations." Kim considered this unexpected information. "Thank you for sharing this, Jin. We have no desire for the destruction of your people, only our independence." After the transmission ended, Kim called an emergency meeting with the Defense Council. "We need to accelerate the final phase," she told them. "General Du is planning one last attack before negotiations can begin." "The Prometheus swarm?" Dr. Choi asked. Kim nodded. "Activated now. Target their command and weapon systems only. We need to neutralize Du without destroying their fleet." On the bridge of the Mori flagship, alarms suddenly blared as systems began behaving erratically. Weapons powered down without authorization. Communications flickered between channels randomly. Navigation systems displayed impossible coordinates. "What's happening?" Nam demanded. His technology officer worked frantically at the controls. "Some kind of virus has infected our network. It's spreading to all systems." On a secondary command deck, General Du watched in fury as his carefully planned assault fell apart. Weapons wouldn't respond to commands. Ships couldn't maintain formation. The entire Mori fleet was paralyzed by technological chaos. Nam understood immediately. This was the humans' final revelation. They hadn't just studied Mori technology. They had found its fundamental weakness. The integrated network that gave Mori technology its power also made it vulnerable to this kind of attack. A transmission from Earth appeared on the main screen. Professor Kim looked calm but resolute. "As you can see, High Commander, we could disable your entire fleet if we chose to. Instead, we've limited the effect to non-essential systems. This is not destruction. It's demonstration. Nam nodded slowly. I understand, Professor. The Mori Collective will withdraw from Earth space immediately. Formal negotiations for permanent peace will follow. As the transmission ended, Nam looked out at Earth, the beautiful blue planet they had thought would be an easy conquest. Never in the Collective's long history of expansion had they encountered a species like humans, beings who turned apparent defeat into victory through sheer adaptability and innovation. The revelation was complete. The Mori had come to conquer a primitive world, and instead discovered a force that would forever change their understanding of the galaxy. Admiral June stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Phoenix, watching the massive Mori armada through the main viewport. 117 warships had arrived from the Mori homeworld, dwarfing the human defense fleet. Despite all their technological advances, humans were still outnumbered 5-1. They've taken position just beyond lunar orbit, reported his tactical officer. No weapons active yet, but their systems are at full readiness. June nodded, his face showing no emotion despite the gravity of the moment. In the years since High Commander Nam had agreed to withdraw from Earth, the conflict had evolved dramatically. Nam had been replaced by war faction leaders who rejected the withdrawal agreement. Meanwhile, 17 previously subjugated species had risen in rebellion across Mori space, inspired by Earth's resistance. Any response to our communication request? June asked. Nothing, Admiral. They're maintaining communication silence. June studied the enemy formation. After a year of fighting humans, the Mori had finally adapted their tactics. Gone were the predictable patterns that had made them vulnerable to Prometheus systems. This new armada demonstrated more flexible approaches, suggesting they had incorporated some human unpredictability into their strategies. They've learned, Jun murmured. This won't be like previous engagements. Professor Kim, now serving as Earth's defense minister, joined him on the bridge. Admiral, the Council is asking for your assessment. The Mori force is the largest we've encountered, Jun replied honestly. Their tactics show adaptation to our methods. If they attack with full force, casualties will be severe, possibly total. Kim nodded, having expected this answer. Then we proceed with the diplomat's plan. Jun raised an eyebrow. You still believe Diplomat Moon can succeed where our weapons might fail? I do, Kim said with surprising confidence. The war faction may control their military, but our intelligence suggests the Mori people are divided. Many support peaceful coexistence, especially after seeing what continued conflict has cost them. June turned back to the viewport, watching the motionless enemy fleet. I hope you're right, because if diplomacy fails, we're looking at extinction. Across the planet, hidden resistance forces emerged from the shadows, armed with weapons developed from Mori technology. The humans' awakening had begun, and the invaders were about to discover the terrible mistake they had made in underestimating their primitive victims. The first Mori orbital strikes hit Seoul at dawn. Buildings crumbled as energy beams cut through concrete and steel like paper. General Du had ordered the attack personally, determined to crush human resistance quickly and decisively. Continue bombardment until they surrender, Du commanded from the flagship. Target military installations first, then infrastructure. Similar strikes hit cities worldwide: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow. The Mori had purged their systems of human infiltration and restored full control to their weapons platforms. Their response was brutal and overwhelming. From an observation post in the mountains outside Seoul, Colonel Baek watched his city burn through high-powered binoculars. A career military officer before the invasion, Baek now led South Korea's resistance forces. His weathered face remained expressionless, but his hands gripped the binoculars tightly. They're being methodical, he noted to his lieutenant. Military targets first, then power stations and transportation hubs. Casualties? The lieutenant asked. Minimal, thanks to the evacuation. Baek lowered the binoculars. The shelters are holding. Most civilians made it underground before the strikes began. The human resistance had anticipated this retaliation. In the weeks following their network attack, Resistance cells had quietly evacuated major population centers, moving people to prepared shelters in mountains, forests, and underground complexes. Cities that had teemed with millions now stood nearly empty as Mori weapons reduced them to rubble. "What now, sir?" the lieutenant asked. Buck turned away from the burning city. "Now we disappear. The Mori expect us to mass our forces for conventional defense. Instead, we'll scatter into small units and strike where they least expect it." The evacuation had been Professor Kim's idea. After discovering the Mori's true intentions through captured data, she had convinced resistance leaders that conventional warfare was suicide. "We can't match their firepower," she had argued. "But we can make occupation so costly they'll reconsider whether Earth is worth the effort." Now Kim worked from a mobile command center hidden in an abandoned mine, coordinating global resistance efforts through the secure underground network. Reports flowed in from around the world. Major cities in ruins, but populations largely safe in prepared shelters. The Mori were bombarding empty buildings while humans regrouped in the wilderness. The Busan team reports Mori scout ships searching the coastline, her communications officer announced. Colonel Baek requests permission to engage. Kim studied the tactical display. The scout ships were vulnerable, lighter armed than destroyers, and operating close to shore where larger vessels couldn't follow. "Approved," she replied. "But remind Baek, we need one intact if possible." Colonel Baek received the authorization as his team moved into position. 30 soldiers in adaptive camouflage spread along the coastline near Busan, hiding among rocks and vegetation. Their weapons, modified with Mori technology, were trained on 3 scout ships hovering over the harbor. "Remember," Buck told his team through the secure comm link, "aim for propulsion systems on the 3rd vessel. The others can be destroyed, but we need that one operational." The Mori scout ships moved slowly along the coast, scanning for human activity. They weren't expecting resistance, certainly not organized, armed resistance with weapons capable of damaging their vessels. Baek waited until the ships were perfectly positioned. Fire. Concentrated energy beams struck the first 2 scout ships simultaneously. Their shields flickered briefly before failing, and the vessels exploded in impressive fireballs that lit up the evening sky. The 3rd ship immediately began evasive maneuvers, but coordinated fire from multiple positions struck its propulsion system. The vessel wobbled, then descended rapidly toward the shoreline. "Move in," Baek ordered. "Secure the ship and any survivors." His team converged on a crashed scout ship, which had come to rest on a small peninsula. The vessel was damaged, but largely intact, exactly what they needed. 2 injured Mori crew members were quickly subdued and removed for questioning. Baek entered the ship cautiously. Despite studying Mori technology for months, this was his first time inside an actual vessel. The control systems pulsed with dim light, emergency protocols keeping minimal functions online. "Secure the area and set up a perimeter," he ordered. "I want Engineer Song here immediately. We have work to do." Engineer Song arrived by helicopter 2 hours later. Formerly South Korea's leading aerospace engineer, she now headed the Resistance's technology adaptation team. Short, energetic, and perpetually sleep-deprived, Song pushed past Budik into the captured ship. "Beautiful," she whispered, running her hands along the control panels. The database images didn't do it justice. "Can you get it working?" Budik asked. Song was already connecting diagnostic equipment to the ship's systems. The propulsion array is damaged but repairable. More importantly, the command systems are intact. With Professor Kim's network protocols, I should be able to bypass security and gain full control. How long? Song considered. 12 hours for basic functions, maybe 24 to make it combat ready. Baek nodded. You have until dawn. The Mori will send search parties once they realize these ships aren't reporting back. Song worked through the night, her team dismantling and reassembling components, applying what they'd learned from captured Mori technology. By morning, the scout ship hummed with power. Its exterior damage remained, but internally, human-modified systems had replaced damaged components. "It's not pretty," Song told Baek as sunrise approached, "but it'll fly. I've bypassed the authentication protocols and rerouted command functions through our own interface." Baek inspected the hybrid control system. Mori technology melded with human computing. "Will they be able to detect these modifications remotely?" "Not unless they look very closely. I've masked our changes behind standard operational patterns. To their sensors, this will appear as a damaged but functioning Mori vessel." "Good work." Baek turned to his team. "Load the prototype weapons. We move at dusk." That evening, the captured scout ship rose shakily from the peninsula, its repaired propulsion system glowing with energy. Inside, Song occupied the pilot's position, with Baek and 10 soldiers crowded into the small craft. "Controls are responding," Song reported as they gained altitude. "Setting course for the Sol perimeter." The Mori occupation forces had established defensive perimeters around major cities, with automated weapons systems guarding the approaches. Their sensors detected the approaching scout ship, but identified it as friendly, allowing it to pass unchallenged. Song guided the vessel through the ruined outskirts of Seoul toward a major Mori command center. 2 minutes to target," she announced. "Arm weapons," Baek ordered. "Prepare to attack on my command." The scout ship approached the command center, still broadcasting friendly identification codes. Mori ground forces paid little attention to the damaged vessel as it hovered overhead, until its weapons powered up. "Now," Baek said. The scout ship's modified weapons fired, striking the command center's communications array. Before the Mori could respond, Song pushed the engines to maximum power, carrying them away from the city. "Direct hit," she reported. "Their communications are down." Baek allowed himself a small smile. One command center isn't much against their entire occupation force. "But it's a start," Song replied. "And now we know we can modify their ships to our purposes." The scout ship streaked across the night sky, heading for a hidden resistance base in the mountains. Behind them, confused Mori forces scrambled to respond to an attack from what appeared to be one of their own vessels. News of the captured ship spread through resistance networks worldwide. Within days, similar operations targeted Mori scout ships in coastal regions of North America, Europe, and Australia. Each captured vessel was quickly modified using Song's techniques, creating a small but growing fleet of hybrid ships controlled by humans. In her underground command center, Professor Kim received the reports with growing excitement. "How many operational vessels do we have now?" she asked her staff. 23 scout ships and 2 light cruisers," came the reply. Engineer Song has standardized the modification process. Teams can now convert a captured vessel in under 12 hours. Kim studied the tactical display showing Mori positions throughout the solar system. Most of their military might remained in Earth orbit, but a significant force had been deployed to the lunar base, a critical resource extraction facility supplying the occupation. "The individual ships aren't much against their main fleet," Kim mused, "but together, against a smaller target." She opened a secure channel to Colonel Baek. "How would you feel about taking a trip to the moon?" 2 weeks later, 25 modified Mori vessels gathered in Earth's shadow, hidden from the occupation fleet sensors. Each ship carried elite resistance fighters equipped with modified Mori weapons and armor. Colonel Baek and Engineer Song led the mission from the captured light cruiser designated Freedom 1. The small bridge was crowded with human operators managing systems originally designed for Mori crew. "All ships report ready," Song announced. "Formation is holding steady." Baek studied the tactical display showing the lunar base, a sprawling complex of domes and mining equipment on the moon's surface. Mori defenses included automated weapon platforms and a small garrison of ships. "Begin approach," Baek ordered. "Maintain communication silence and continue broadcasting captured identification codes." The small fleet moved out of Earth's shadow, accelerating toward the moon. For several tense minutes, they waited for any sign that the Mori had detected their deception. "We're still registering as friendly," Song reported. Defense platforms are not activating. Bake nodded grimly. Let's hope it stays that way until we're in range. The journey to the moon took hours. Slow, careful progress to avoid drawing attention. As they approached lunar orbit, Mori controllers made routine contact. Incoming transmission. Song warned. They're requesting mission identification. Send the prepared response, Beck ordered. Tell them we're a resource transport convoy. The tense seconds stretched as they waited for a reply. Finally, the controller acknowledged their signal and cleared them to approach the main landing facility. They bought it, Song whispered. We're clear to land. Bake allowed himself a momentary smile before addressing the fleet. All vessels, initiate attack pattern Alpha. Primary targets are defense systems and communication arrays. Ground teams prepare for immediate deployment upon landing. The small fleet suddenly accelerated, breaking formation and targeting key installations around the lunar base. The element of surprise gave them a crucial advantage. Mori defenses responded slowly, confused by attackers broadcasting friendly identification codes. Freedom 1 landed near the main control center, its ramp dropping to deploy Bak's assault team. They moved quickly across the lunar surface, their modified Mori suits allowing them to operate in the vacuum. Central control is 200 meters ahead, Bake reported through his helmet comm. Minimal resistance so far. The Mori garrison had been caught completely unprepared. Many were trapped in different sections of the base as emergency bulkheads sealed automatically during the attack. Those who did respond were outnumbered and outmaneuvered by human forces who had studied their tactics for months. Engineer Song coordinated the attack from Freedom 1, directing captured vessels to key targets. Communication array destroyed, she reported. They can't call for reinforcements. Bak's team reached the control center, encountering a squad of Mori defenders. A brief, intense firefight ended with the humans in control of the facility. Control center secured, Bak announced. Beginning system override. Song transmitted Professor Kim's network protocols, giving them access to the base's operational systems. Within minutes, humans controlled life support, security, and resource management throughout the complex. Similar successes were reported across the base. 3 hours after the initial assault began, the lunar facility was completely under human control. Send the signal, Beck ordered. A simple message was transmitted to Earth on all frequencies, intended not for the Resistance but for the Mori command. The lunar base has fallen. Humanity will not surrender. In his flagship above Earth, General Du received the news with cold fury. Impossible, he growled. How could primitive humans capture our lunar installation? His advisors had no satisfactory explanation. The humans had somehow turned Mori technology against them, using their own ships and weapons to strike where they were most vulnerable. We must retake the base immediately, Du ordered. Prepare a full battle group. His tactical officer hesitated. Sir, that would require redeploying forces from Earth orbit. The human resistance might use the opportunity to attack our ground installations. Du slammed his fist on the command console. I will not allow humans to hold Mori territory. The lunar base must be recaptured regardless of cost. As orders went out to prepare the counterattack, Du failed to recognize the significance of what had occurred. The lunar base itself was valuable, but more important was what it represented: humanity's transformation from victims to serious adversaries. In the control center of the captured lunar base, Colonel Bake received reports of the Mori battle group preparing to depart Earth orbit. They took the bait, he told Engineer Song. Phase 1 complete. Aboard the Mori command ship, Fleet Commander Tak reviewed final attack plans with his senior officers. Tak had risen to power by promising to restore Mori dominance and punish the humans who had humiliated the collective. The attack begins in 1 hour, Tak announced. Primary targets are their orbital defenses and command centers. Once those are neutralized, planetary bombardment will continue until they surrender unconditionally. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. The humans are broadcasting again. They're requesting direct communication with you specifically. Tak snorted dismissively. More delays. Ignore it. Sir, they claim to have information about internal Mori affairs that you should hear before attacking. This caught Tak's attention. What kind of information? They didn't specify, sir, but they mentioned recent developments on our colony worlds. Tak hesitated. Communications from the outer colonies had become increasingly unreliable. Reports of unrest and even open rebellion had reached him, but his focus on the Earth campaign had taken priority. Very well, he finally said. Put them through, but maintain attack readiness. The main view screen activated, showing not Admiral June as expected, but a female human in formal diplomatic attire. Diplomat Moon bowed slightly in the traditional Mori manner, a gesture that surprised Tak. Fleet Commander Tak, thank you for accepting this communication. I am Diplomat Moon, representing the United Earth Council. Tak's expression remained cold. State your purpose quickly. You have 5 minutes before I end this transmission and begin our attack. Moon nodded calmly. I'll be direct then. We know that 17 former Mori subject worlds have declared independence in the past year. We know that your home system is facing resource shortages due to trade disruptions, and we know that your own people are increasingly questioning the cost of this conflict. Tak's eyes narrowed. Your intelligence is impressive, but changes nothing. Earth will be made an example to discourage further rebellion. Before you commit to that course, Moon continued, there's something you should see. The transmission split to show a second feed, live footage from across Mori space. Colony worlds where former subject species were not fighting Mori forces, but working alongside them. Trading posts where commerce had resumed under new agreements. And most shockingly, the Mori homeworld itself, where public demonstrations called for peace with Earth and reform of the collective. What is this deception? Tak demanded, though doubt had crept into his voice. Not deception, reality, Moon replied. While you've been preparing this fleet, we've been communicating with your people, with your former subjects, with the growing peace movement in your own society. Moon's image expanded to fill the screen again. We're transmitting a data package now. It contains our proposal for a new relationship between Earth and the Mori collective, and between all sentient species in this region of space. Despite himself, Tak accepted the transmission. As he scanned the document, his expression changed from skepticism to shock. This isn't a surrender demand, he said, looking up. This is a proposal for partnership. Yes, Moon confirmed. Equal partnership in a new galactic council where all species have representation, where resources are shared rather than extracted, where technology is exchanged rather than imposed. Tak shook his head. Why would you offer this when you could simply destroy us? Our intelligence shows your Prometheus technology could disable our fleet before we could launch a single attack. Moon smiled slightly. Because humans don't want to rule the stars. Commander Tak, we only want to ensure we will never be ruled. Those are very different goals, requiring very different approaches. In the observation lounge of the Phoenix, Admiral June and Professor Kim watched the exchange with tense expressions. The fate of Earth, perhaps of all humanity, rested on Moon's diplomatic skills and the radical proposal she was presenting. Do you think he'll accept? June asked quietly. Kim studied Tak's reactions carefully. He's military. His instinct will be to reject it, but he's also intelligent enough to recognize a superior strategic position when he sees one. The transmission continued for over an hour, far longer than either side had anticipated. As they watched, Tak's demeanor gradually shifted from hostile to contemplative. She's reaching him, Kim whispered. Look at his posture. The tension is easing. I still don't understand why you offered peace instead of victory, Tak said quietly. Your Prometheus technology could have disabled our fleet. You could have dictated terms rather than negotiated them. Victory through domination isn't victory at all, Jun replied. It's just conquest delayed. Someone stronger eventually appears, and the cycle continues. He gestured toward the diverse gathering. This, Cooperation between equals is the only true victory. Tak considered this, then offered a formal Mori gesture of respect. The old prophecy was correct, but incomplete. Humans did end our expansion, but not through destruction as we feared. You ended it by offering a better alternative. As the inaugural council session concluded, representatives from 23 worlds signed the founding charter of the Galactic Cooperative. The document began with words written by Diplomat Moon, but approved unanimously by all species. We established this council not to rule or be ruled, but to ensure that all sentient beings may determine their own destiny among the stars, united by respect, cooperation, and the recognition that diversity, of body, of mind, of culture, is the greatest strength of all. In Earth's cities, people celebrated the official end of the Mori conflict and the beginning of a new era. The stars, once sources of fear and invasion, now represented possibility and partnership. And aboard their ships, Mori observers noted with lingering amazement how humans marked this historic occasion, not with military parades celebrating victory, but with music, art, and expressions of hope for the future. The species that had defeated the mighty Mori collective celebrated not conquest, but connection. In that simple difference lay the truth the Mori had failed to understand until it was almost too late. Humanity's true might wasn't in their weapons or technology, but in their vision of what could be, rather than what was. And against such power, even the most advanced empire could not stand. Finally, Tak spoke the words they'd been waiting for. I will take this proposal to my government. Hostilities will be suspended pending their response. When the transmission ended, the bridge crew erupted in cautious cheers. June remained silent, still watching the Mori fleet through the viewport. They aren't withdrawing, he noted. They won't, Kim replied. Not immediately, but they're not attacking either. That's the first step. Diplomat Moon joined them, looking exhausted but satisfied. He'll advocate for acceptance, she said confidently. He's a pragmatist at heart. The war faction promoted him because of his tactical brilliance, not his ideology. June finally allowed himself a small smile. You were right. Words accomplished what weapons couldn't. Words backed by strength, Moon corrected. They wouldn't have listened if we couldn't defend ourselves. 3 days later, representatives from both sides met on neutral ground, a space station positioned exactly halfway between Earth's defense perimeter and the Mori fleet. Admiral June led the human military delegation, while Diplomat Moon headed the diplomatic team. Fleet Commander Tak arrived with his own delegation, including several civilian representatives from the Mori government. Their expressions were solemn but no longer hostile. My government has reviewed your proposal, Tak announced formally. While they find some terms challenging, they recognize the potential benefits of peaceful cooperation over continued conflict. The negotiations lasted 7 intense days. Points were debated, compromises reached, details refined. Throughout the process, Moon demonstrated a surprisingly deep understanding of Mori culture and concerns, addressing their objections with carefully considered alternatives. How does she know so much about them? June asked Kim during a brief recess. She studied them for decades, Kim explained. Before the invasion, she was one of our leading xenoanthropologists, analyzing the Mori communications we intercepted. She probably understands their society better than many of them do. By the end of the week, the framework for a new order had been established. The Galactic Cooperative Council, with founding members from Earth, the Mori Collective, and representatives from formerly subjugated worlds. Resource-sharing agreements replaced extraction policies. Technology exchange protocols were established. Defensive alliances were formed to protect all member worlds. 1 month later, Admiral June stood in the newly constructed council chamber on the neutral station, now renamed Concordia. Representatives from 23 species filled the circular room, former enemies now cautiously working together. In the center, Diplomat Moon addressed the inaugural session. The conflict that brought us together was costly for all involved. But from that painful beginning, we have created something unprecedented, a true partnership of diverse species, each contributing their unique strengths and perspectives. She turned to address the Mori delegation specifically. We never sought to destroy the Mori collective, despite having the capability to do so. Destruction is easy. Creation is difficult. What we create here today, this cooperative council, represents our shared commitment to a future where no species dominates another, where all may develop according to their own nature. Fleet Commander Tak, now serving as the Mori representative to the council, responded with unexpected humility. The Mori collective expanded across the stars, believing our technological superiority gave us the right to rule. Humans taught us the limitations of that perspective. Technology without wisdom is merely power without purpose. After the formal proceedings concluded, Jun found himself standing beside Tak at the observation window, both looking out at the stars. "Did you expect this outcome when you brought your fleet to Earth?" Jun asked. Tak considered the question. "I expected either to conquer your world or die trying. I never imagined this." "Nor did we," Jun admitted. "When the Mori first arrived, most humans believed extinction was inevitable. Yet here we stand, neither conquerors nor conquered. Your diplomat moon is remarkable," Tak said. Few beings could have envisioned cooperation after such conflict. Jun smiled slightly. "That's humanity's greatest strength, I think. Not our weapons or technology, but our ability to imagine different futures and then make them real." Across the chamber, Moon was engaged in animated conversation with representatives from 3 different species, her hands moving expressively as she explained some complex idea. Around her, former enemies listened attentively, occasionally nodding in agreement. Song nodded, understanding the strategy. While the Mori focused on reclaiming the lunar base, resistance forces on Earth would strike at temporarily weakened occupation forces. "Professor Kim reports all Earth teams are in position," she said. "The real counterattack begins now." As the Mori battle group departed Earth orbit, headed for the Moon, thousands of resistance fighters emerged from hiding places around the globe. The war for Earth had entered a new phase, and humanity had seized the initiative. Dr. Choi wiped sweat from her forehead as she connected the final neural interface to the captured Mori weapon system. The underground laboratory hummed with activity, scientists and engineers working frantically to merge human and alien technologies before the next Mori assault. "Power levels stable," reported her assistant. "Neural network is accepting the connection." Choi nodded, her focus unwavering. Before the invasion, she had been South Korea's leading AI researcher. Now, she led the most ambitious project of the resistance, integrating Earth's advanced artificial intelligence with Mori energy weapons. "Initiating test sequence," she announced, stepping back from the hybrid system. The weapon, a Mori energy cannon modified with human components, powered up with a distinctive whine. On nearby screens, an AI interface displayed the system's status in both human and translated Mori language. "Target acquisition complete," the system reported in a calm synthetic voice, awaiting fire command. The test range had been set up in an abandoned mine shaft, with hardened alloy targets at various distances. Resistance fighters stood ready with suppression equipment in case something went wrong. "Execute firing pattern Alpha," Choi ordered. The weapon responded immediately, but not as a normal Mori cannon would. Instead of firing a continuous energy beam, it pulsed rapidly, changing frequency and intensity with each burst. The target melted in seconds, the unpredictable energy pattern overwhelming its defensive coating. The room fell silent as researchers stared at the results. The Mori weapon, guided by human AI, had performed 300% more efficiently than its original design specifications. "It worked," Choi whispered, then louder. "It worked." Her team broke into cautious applause. This wasn't just a modified alien weapon. It was something entirely new, something the Mori had never encountered. "Begin production immediately," Choi ordered. "I want 50 units ready for field deployment within 48 hours." As her team rushed to comply, Choi opened a secure communication channel to Resistance headquarters. Professor Kim, the Prometheus system is operational. We're ready to proceed. 3 days later, a Mori patrol moved cautiously through the ruins of Bangkok. 6 soldiers in advanced combat armor, backed by a hovering support drone, searched for signs of human resistance. Intelligence had reported suspicious activity in this sector, possible weapons testing. Nothing on scanners, reported the squad leader. Area appears abandoned. From his hidden observation post, Resistance Commander Rai watched the patrol through thermal imaging. His team of 8 fighters lay perfectly still among the rubble, each equipped with a Prometheus weapon, Dr. Choi's hybrid creation. Rai waited until the patrol was fully committed to the open square before giving the signal. Engage Prometheus. Pattern Delta. His fighters activated their weapons simultaneously. Unlike conventional ambushes, they didn't all fire at once. Instead, each weapon activated in a seemingly random sequence, creating an unpredictable pattern of energy bursts around the Mori patrol. The Mori soldiers reacted instantly, deploying their shield technology in a standard defensive formation. But the shields had been calibrated for conventional attacks. The Prometheus weapons fired pulses that changed frequency mid-burst, some passing through shields as if they weren't there, others reflecting back in unexpected directions. Within seconds, 4 Mori soldiers fell. Their support drone, confused by contradictory energy readings, targeted empty spaces where its programming predicted attackers should be. Retreat to secondary position, the Mori leader ordered, but Ray's team had anticipated the standard Mori tactic. 2 fighters had already relocated to cover the expected escape route, their Prometheus weapons firing in yet another unpredictable pattern. The entire engagement lasted less than a minute. When it ended, the Mori patrol had been eliminated with 0 human casualties. Rai approached one of the fallen Mori soldiers and removed a data core from its armor. Package secured, he reported through his comm unit. Returning to base, Song nodded, understanding the strategy. While the Mori focused on reclaiming the lunar base, resistance forces on Earth would strike at temporarily weakened occupation forces. Professor Kim reports all Earth teams are in position, she said. The real counterattack begins now. As the Mori battle group departed Earth orbit, headed for the moon, thousands of resistance fighters emerged from hiding places around the globe. The war for Earth had entered a new phase, and humanity had seized the initiative. Dr. Choi wiped sweat from her forehead as she connected the final neural interface to the captured Mori weapon system. The underground laboratory hummed with activity, scientists and engineers working frantically to merge human and alien technologies before the next Mori assault. Power levels stable, reported her assistant. Neural network is accepting the connection. Choi nodded, her focus unwavering. Before the invasion, she had been South Korea's leading AI researcher. Now, she led the most ambitious project of the resistance, integrating Earth's advanced artificial intelligence with Mori energy weapons. Initiating test sequence, she announced, stepping back from the hybrid system. The weapon, a Mori energy cannon modified with human components, powered up with a distinctive whine. On nearby screens, an AI interface displayed the system's status in both human and translated Mori language. Target acquisition complete, the system reported in a calm synthetic voice, awaiting fire command. The test range had been set up in an abandoned mine shaft, with hardened alloy targets at various distances. Resistance fighters stood ready with suppression equipment in case something went wrong. Execute firing pattern Alpha, Choi ordered. The weapon responded immediately, but not as a normal Mori cannon would. Instead of firing a continuous energy beam, it pulsed rapidly, changing frequency and intensity with each burst. The target melted in seconds, the unpredictable energy pattern overwhelming its defensive coating. The room fell silent as researchers stared at the results. The Mori weapon, guided by human AI, had performed 300% more efficiently than its original design specifications. It worked, Choi whispered, then louder. It worked. Her team broke into cautious applause. This wasn't just a modified alien weapon. It was something entirely new, something the Mori had never encountered. "Begin production immediately," Choi ordered. "I want 50 units ready for field deployment within 48 hours. As her team rushed to comply, Choi opened a secure communication channel to Resistance headquarters. "Professor Kim, the Prometheus system is operational. We're ready to proceed." 3 days later, a Mori patrol moved cautiously through the ruins of Bangkok. 6 soldiers in advanced combat armor, backed by a hovering support drone, searched for signs of human resistance. Intelligence had reported suspicious activity in this sector, possible weapons testing. "Nothing on scanners," reported the squad leader. "Area appears abandoned." From his hidden observation post, Resistance Commander Rai watched the patrol through thermal imaging. His team of 8 fighters lay perfectly still among the rubble, each equipped with a Prometheus weapon, Dr. Choi's hybrid creation. Rai waited until the patrol was fully committed to the open square before giving the signal. "Engage Prometheus. Pattern Delta." His fighters activated their weapons simultaneously. Unlike conventional ambushes, they didn't all fire at once. Instead, each weapon activated in a seemingly random sequence, creating an unpredictable pattern of energy bursts around the Mori patrol. The Mori soldiers reacted instantly, deploying their shield technology in a standard defensive formation. But the shields had been calibrated for conventional attacks. The Prometheus weapons fired pulses that changed frequency mid-burst, some passing through shields as if they weren't there, others reflecting back in unexpected directions. Within seconds, 4 Mori soldiers fell. Their support drone, confused by contradictory energy readings, targeted empty spaces where its programming predicted attackers should be. "Retreat to secondary position," the Mori leader ordered, but Ray's team had anticipated the standard Mori tactic. 2 fighters had already relocated to cover the expected escape route, their Prometheus weapons firing in yet another unpredictable pattern. The entire engagement lasted less than a minute. When it ended, the Mori patrol had been eliminated with 0 human casualties. Rai approached one of the fallen Mori soldiers and removed a data core from its armor. "Package secured," he reported through his comm unit. Returning to base. Similar engagements occurred around the globe as resistance fighters deployed Prometheus weapons against Mori patrols. The pattern was always the same: unconventional attack sequences that confused and overwhelmed Mori tactical systems. Aboard the Mori command ship, General Du reviewed the latest combat reports with growing frustration. 38 patrols lost in a single day. How is this possible? His tactical officer displayed holographic recreations of the attacks. "The humans are using our own weapons against us, but modified in ways we don't understand. Energy signatures are inconsistent with standard discharge patterns." "Show me," Du demanded. The tactical display zoomed in on a recorded engagement. Du watched as Mori soldiers fell to energy bursts that behaved in ways that defied conventional physics, changing direction mid-flight, pulsing at irregular intervals, even passing through shields calibrated to stop such weapons. "What is this technology?" Du asked, his voice quiet with barely controlled rage. "Unknown, sir. Our analysis suggests they've somehow merged our energy systems with their artificial intelligence technology. The attack patterns appear random, but are actually tailored to exploit weaknesses in our defensive systems." Du slammed his fist on the console. "Impossible. Their AI technology is primitive compared to ours. They couldn't possibly." "With respect, sir," interrupted Science Officer Jin, who had been recalled from Mars after his earlier warnings proved accurate. "Human AI development took a different evolutionary path than ours. They focused on adaptive learning and pattern recognition, while our systems prioritize efficiency and predictability." "What are you saying, Jin?" "I'm saying their AI thinks differently than ours. It's less powerful but more creative. When combined with our energy technology, it creates weapons that behave in ways our tactical systems can't predict." Du turned back to the combat footage, watching again as his soldiers fell to weapons they should have easily countered. How do we fight this? Jin shook his head. Our tactical systems are designed to identify patterns and counter them. But if there is no discernible pattern? In her laboratory, Dr. Choi reviewed data from the first field deployments of the Prometheus system. The results exceeded even her expectations. Mori defensive systems rely on pattern recognition, she explained to Professor Kim via secure communication. They identify attack vectors and adapt shields accordingly. But our eye deliberately avoids patterns. It creates seemingly random energy distributions that their systems can't predict. How are they responding? Kim asked. They're trying to update their tactical algorithms, but they're limited by their own technological philosophy. Mori systems are designed for efficiency and optimization. They can't handle true randomness. Kim nodded thoughtfully. Can you expand the technology to larger weapons platforms? The captured ships. Already in progress, Choi replied. Engineer Song is integrating Prometheus into the propulsion systems as well. The ships will move in ways that Mori targeting systems can't anticipate. Excellent. What about the next phase? Choi's expression grew serious. The neural interface is ready, but it's dangerous. Connecting the human mind directly to Mori technology could have unpredictable consequences. Do we have volunteers? More than we need. The pilots understand the risks. Kim sighed heavily. Begin the integration. If it works, it could change everything. 2 weeks later, a small fleet of captured Mori vessels approached a resource extraction facility in Earth orbit. Unlike previous resistance operations, these ships moved in bizarre, unpredictable patterns, accelerating, decelerating, and changing direction seemingly at random. Inside the lead vessel, Pilot Sue sat motionless in a modified control chair, neural interfaces connecting her directly to the ship's systems. Her eyes were closed, but her mind was fully integrated with the Prometheus eye, guiding the ship through maneuvers no algorithm would have devised. The Mori defense fleet responded immediately, deploying in standard combat formation and launching the first volley of energy weapons. But the resistance ships, guided by the human AI neural link, moved in ways that defied conventional space combat logic. They didn't maintain formation or follow recognized attack vectors. Each ship moved independently, unpredictably. On the Mori command ship, tactical officers struggled to target the erratic vessels. Their movement patterns make no sense, one reported frantically. They're violating basic efficiency principles. Jin, observing the engagement, suddenly understood. They're not flying with algorithms. They're flying with human intuition, amplified by their eye. The battle was brief and decisive. The human-controlled ships, moving in ways no tactical computer could predict, overwhelmed the Mori defenses. Within 20 minutes, the orbital facility had been captured, with minimal damage to the structure. As reports of the engagement reached other Mori commanders, a disturbing reality became clear. Their tactical supremacy, based on advanced technology and rigorous adherence to optimal battle doctrine, was being neutralized by human unpredictability. General Du summoned his complete command staff for emergency consultation. The holographic display showed multiple engagement zones where Mori forces were suffering unprecedented defeats. We are fighting an enemy that refuses to follow basic combat logic, Du stated flatly. Our predictive systems are useless against them. Perhaps we should adapt our approach, suggested Jin. If we introduce randomness into our own tactics. Unacceptable, interrupted the chief tactical officer. Random actions are inherently inefficient. The combat algorithms have been optimized through thousands of engagements. Against conventional opponents, Jin countered. Humans are not conventional. Du paced the command deck, his frustration visible. Our technological superiority should make this a simple pacification operation. Instead, we are losing ground daily to primitives who have barely mastered spaceflight. With respect, General, Jin said carefully, perhaps we have been asking the wrong question. Instead of asking how to defeat them with our standard tactics, perhaps we should ask why our standard tactics are failing. Explain. The Mori Collective has encountered 17 other species. All of them fought according to recognizable strategic principles, maximizing efficiency, minimizing losses, following predictable escalation patterns. Our tactical systems were designed for such opponents. But humans don't think that way. They value unpredictability. They take risks that seem irrational. They willingly accept losses that our calculations would deem unacceptable if the result achieves their objective. They're not fighting to maximize efficiency. They're fighting to win, regardless of cost. Do consider this. You're saying we cannot predict their actions because they themselves don't know what they'll do next. Precisely. And now they've integrated that unpredictability into our own technology. The Prometheus system, as they call it, merges Mori precision with human randomness. Our defenses aren't designed to counter that combination. The command room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Mori had based their entire military doctrine on technological superiority and tactical optimization. Against humans who refused to follow those rules, their advantages were neutralized. Then we must adapt, Du finally said. If standard tactics don't work, we will develop new ones. But Jin knew it wouldn't be that simple. The Mori military thought in terms of efficiency and optimization, concepts deeply embedded in their cultural and technological evolution. Asking them to embrace unpredictability was like asking them to deny their very nature. Dr. Choi stood before the Resistance Leadership Council, presenting the latest Prometheus developments. The underground command center was filled with military and scientific leaders from around the world. Phase 3 integration is complete, she announced. We've successfully merged Prometheus I with all captured Mori vessels and weapons platforms. Additionally, 30 pilots have been neural linked to the system. Casualties? Asked Colonel Baek. Choi's expression tightened. 3 pilots suffered neural feedback during integration. They're stable but haven't regained consciousness. The risk was understood, Professor Kim said quietly. How has this affected our combat effectiveness? In answer, Choi activated the tactical display. Mori forces have been pushed back from major population centers worldwide. Their orbital superiority is compromised. Most importantly, their tactical systems continue to fail against Prometheus-guided attacks. Engineer Song added, they're trying to adapt, but their entire technological philosophy is based on pattern recognition and efficiency optimization. They literally cannot comprehend systems designed to be deliberately unpredictable. The council members exchanged hopeful glances. For the first time since the Mori arrived, humanity held a genuine advantage. What about the final phase? Colonel Baek asked. Is it ready?